Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers about rap music on trial. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. You know, we're seeing more cases where aspiring and established hip-hop artists are facing criminal cases with their lyrics used as evidence. So where do we draw the line between artistic expression and admissions of guilt?
You gotta sell cocaine, I can just file a claim, rats coming straight to the bank.
33-year-old rapper Nuke Bizzle, real name Fontrell Barnes, bragged in his music video called EDD about all the money he was making filing false unemployment claims for COVID relief cash, rapping bars like, "You gotta sell cocaine, I can just file a claim." California prosecutors say he admitted to filing false claims amounting to $1.2 million and is now looking at 20 years behind bars. Saying too much is always risky, says criminal defense attorney Charles Tucker Jr.
I'd like to see my defendants, my clients, try to be more conscious of the information they give out for public consumption.
The stunning racketeering charges against hip-hop stars Young Thug and Gunna made bail nearly impossible. The state RICO case alleged their music label was actually a gang. That sparked outrage in the music industry and a public awareness campaign called Protect Black Art.
It's extremely concerning, though, because when you start applying RICO to rappers and to artists, it becomes highly problematic.
A bill is before the New York State Legislature in Albany, co-authored by State Senator Jamal Bailey and Assemblymember Catalina Cruz. It's supported by major artists like Jay-Z and Fat Joe. It limits the ways prosecutors can use music as evidence. The goal is to preserve artistic freedom and First Amendment rights.
This is not something that says that you cannot, under any circumstances, utilize lyrics against an individual. But what this does do is create a higher bar for the prosecution to be able to do it.
What we've seen across the country is specific targeting of Black artists and the way in which they express themselves through the avenue of rap and using those lyrics, using that music against them in criminal trials.
There's a lot to this. Let's find out what our panel has to say.
Joining me is New York State Senator Jamal Bailey. He is one of the authors of the law here in New York State. He represents the 36th Senate District, that's the North Bronx and Mount Vernon in New York. And Senator Bailey, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Lisa, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Also with us is Charles Tucker Jr. He's a managing partner of Tucker Law Group. He's also a criminal defense and civil rights attorney and a former prosecutor. He's represented artists and also dealt with a lot of these cases around these speech issues as well. Charles, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure to be here, Lisa.
We appreciate it. Also with us is Chuck Creekmore. He's the CEO of allhiphop.com and also a hip hop commentator. Chuck, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Chuck, how serious an issue is this? Because you've covered on allhiphop.com many stories, especially over the last 5 to 6 years, where artists have gotten caught up with the law and then the lyrics become an issue. How big an issue is this?
I think it's a huge issue. I also think it's a nuanced issue too. So when hip hop started in its infancy, as people like Grandmaster Melly Mel started to tell what was going on, a lot of that was regarded as reporting or street reporting or telling what's going on the front lines. And as it continued on, it became more and more sensational. So for example, NWA, they were talking more in the first person. They were calling themselves a gang and they were representing themselves much differently. And so now in the present day, we have a total collision of the art and what's going on in the streets. And I think each case is different. There are some cases where a rapper literally gives very specific details on crimes and things that they purport to do. Whether or not they do that is another story. I'll give you a perfect example. Recently, one artist rapped about robbing ATMs. Well, he was arrested for doing just that. Did he actually do that? I don't know. but the lyrics certainly don't help out his situation. So right now, and there's so many more examples, obviously with Young Thug and his crew, there's a situation there where it gets much blurrier. And
right,
so
and we're gonna get into that in this episode. Senator Bailey, what was your motivation in terms of the law? Because we saw some high-profile artists getting involved in it, like Fat Joe, Jay-Z, Meek Mill. There were many that really supported this, but what made you want to take this on?
Protecting artistic expression. I sit at the intersection of being an attorney, a legislator, and a hip hop fan. And you can do all of it at the same time, right? And so as I sit at this intersection, I think about some of the sensationalistic art, lyrics that I've heard that Chuck mentioned, right? And how hip hop has gone from storytelling to braggadocio, back to storytelling, back to braggadocio. And there's no specific bright line that you can say that an artist is doing such, right? So we have to be able to allow artists who have what's called creative expression, to be able to protect Black art, as folks are saying, right? What we're not saying is that if an individual confesses to a crime in a song that some way can't be prosecuted. This is not what this law does. This requires prosecutors to provide clear and convincing evidence that there is a specific nexus between the lyrics that are mentioned and the specific act that is alleged, right? So, none of us really believe, no disrespect to Rick Ross and his storytelling, that Pablo Noriega actually owes him 100 favors. That's clearly braggadocio, right? That's not something that we should be able to bring in a court of law. However, right, if there is something that is more specific, that is more in line with keeping our streets safe, and a prosecutor can bring that in, we're not saying that you shouldn't be able to bring that in. We're just saying that you have to clear a higher bar than what you're doing right now. Because what's happening right now, you're bringing lyrics in about something that somebody maybe maybe did, and you're charging them with a significant criminal offense for that, and that's just not fair. Now, and it's also, and one other thing I wanted to touch on is that, those of us who are hip hop fans, we know about ghostwriters. How do we know about the present state of mind of an individual? Who actually wrote the lyrics? What was their mind state when they wrote the lyrics? So we get into a contextual question in which I just simply believe that you need to have a higher bar to be able to bring these lyrics against someone.
And let me get, Charles Tucker, what is your take on this? How necessary was something like this?
Well, Senator Bailey points out, once he starts mentioning clear and convincing evidence, that creates I believe in some regards, possible insurmountable hurdles to prosecutors kind of trying, already dealt with, beyond a reasonable doubt standard, but now to create an even heightened standard, that could easily present some hurdles. But to his point, I've never heard, and, I try to diversify, my musical selection, but I've never heard of anybody talking about other genres of music where the expression is just as explicit, if not more, but you only kind of hear it in the rap sense. The rappers are the ones inciting violence in our communities and in our culture. Really? And we know that's not the case. Those of us who are, fluid in music and what the expression is, should it be curtailed that in such a way? Part of me would say, as a criminal defense attorney, I don't want that used against my client unless they could really prove the nexus and the connection. Let them actually prove the elements of the charges, but not try to kind of manufacture something, so to speak.
We'll be right back.
Charles, I want to start with you on this. In terms of the cases, we've seen some cases of aspiring rappers, very young in New York City, where they were basically using the videos to create beef with the ops, with the opposition, with another gang, and using that to stir up trouble. They go in front of the enemy's mother's house and make really bad comments, put that into a rap music. And then in one case in Brooklyn, they actually, according to the district attorney, they used the actual guns that were used in these actual shootings where somebody was killed. And but is that the norm, or is that the exception, or what are we talking about here?
It runs the gambit, Lisa. There's been instances. Imagine a defense attorney, seeing that, the evidence has been given to the prosecution, through YouTube or some other, social media device where the defendants, the alleged defendants, are posting, pictures of money and guns, and alleged perpetrators, let's just say, arguably I could recall at least 2 instances where I'm trying to, provide a defense for my client based on their constitutional rights. And, the alleged, co-conspirators, they're all seen in YouTube videos, on public social networks. That kind of presents, some serious challenges. And, being that they freely put it up there, and it gives advantages to law enforcement to use this material.
Senator Bailey, what about is there an implicit bias in singling out rap music? Because we're going through, not just in the New York area, but nationally, a major crime wave. Violence is part of our popular entertainment and film and television shows, streaming programs, all of that type of thing that have nothing to do with rap music. But do you feel there's a certain implicit bias here?
I certainly do. And I think that unfortunately it gets conflated, right? Hip hop music should not be equated to violence. There are country artists who have purportedly committed a number of felonies in some of their artistic expression, yet country music is not vilified at the level that hip hop music is vilified. I certainly don't want to excuse violence. I certainly, am a proponent of public safety. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can love rap music and love safe streets, and we all do love that at the same time. But at the same time, we have to make sure that if you're looking to prove something, if you're looking to prove that an act was committed, and that the lyric should not just be some circumstantial evidence that you can just bring in as your primary method of a prosecution. If there are offenses taking place, I'm going to be very clear. We don't want to stop the police or the prosecutors from keeping our streets safe. I want to be very clear about that. But again, you just cannot bring a lyric out of context, for one, that we don't know the instance in which it was uttered or who it was written by, and say that this is specifically related to an offense unless you can prove it with based upon the standard that I mentioned before of clear and convincing evidence.
And Chuck, how much of this is driven by what the public wants and by what fans want? Because people in the industry have told me, in the music industry, say, you know what, they do a video and they're waving around guns and they're talking about, the ops and this and that. They're going to get millions of views. They do a video about, the personal struggle they're going through, unless they're one of the superstars, an emo type star. They're not really going to get that type of attention. How much of that has to do with our culture right now, with the violence, whether it's video games, whether it's television, film? That's what people seem to want.
Well, I think we have essentially a perfect storm here. We have the corporations that are signing these artists and promoting this type of artists. You have the fans, largely white, young suburban kids, that are consuming it, whether it's through YouTube and social media and actually, streaming and buying. And then you have the artists as well, who are oftentimes doing whatever it takes to change their life conditions. And oftentimes they do that by any means necessary. So if you see gunplay and sex and violence and beef driving the algorithm, driving the attention you're able to get, you're going to pretty much do whatever it takes. You explicitly understand that if I do an album of love songs as a rapper, it's usually going to be a failure.
Chuck, when we heard about the arrests of Young Thug and Gunna and the others, a lot of people were shocked that an artist of his stature, that had so many big hits, that had such a huge career, he just was really at the top of his field, doing all these concerts and all of that he could get caught up in something criminally. And then with the talk of the lyrics being involved, that concerned a lot of people. What was your reaction when you heard about that?
Well, I was stunned just like everyone else, but I also thought about something Ice-T said once upon a time. He said, freedom of speech, but you better watch what you say. And I think that comes into play now as well, even though I don't think he explicitly meant that regarding lyrics being used in a trial situation. it's an unfortunate reality, and we do have to push back on it. But the things we say, the things we do, the things we promote are oftentimes either perception wise or reality wise going to be used against you, no matter whether that's good or bad or evil, whatever, it's going to be used against you. And I think we just have to keep that in mind when, however we decide to move. So this isn't to say, oh, don't do your art or anything like that, but it's more like, let's be cognizant that racism is still alive and well. The playing field is not the same, and the standards are not the same for hip hop that they are used against other forms of art. So in that respect, I think we've seen a large part of our community jump up without even knowing the facts of the case, or not being, obviously the trial hasn't started, but just knowing the character of the people involved and being willing to put their reputation on the line.
Charles, in terms of the case against Young Thug and Gunna is it's a RICO, a state RICO conspiracy case. What are your concerns about these conspiracy cases?
Well, the conspiracy cases are, from a prosecution standpoint and defense standpoint, those are tough cases to defend. You're looking at an uphill battle, so to speak. And, at best, sometimes from the prosecution's realm, there are missing pieces that they try to construe together and create, this conspiracy, when in reality, just based on the definition, it's not there. So it's a challenge in defense, just going into it, head first, knowing what you're up against. And then the reality of being able, again, to kind of construe certain things to, for a jury who's not going to really understand, conspiracy and RICO. The judges do their best and give their best explanation of things, but the average person just doesn't really have that, wherewithal to really comprehend that.
We should note that this RICO law was created for the mob because they didn't have a direct line to the mob bosses. They were arresting all the underbosses or the street level guys, but they could never get the guys at the top of the food chain.
No, exactly. Senator Bailey, in terms of how you intend your law to be implemented, give us a broader sense of, is this the type of thing that you want your law to really protect against? Is like protect innocent people if there's real crimes being committed, but also protect innocent artists who may have been talking about what they saw or knew or grew up around without actually committing crimes.
Precisely. So in law school, I remember, I think it was contract law. There was a conversation about puffery, right? The phrase puffery is something that I'll never forget it, because it's something that you are allowed to be able to, expand the reaches of what normalcy would be when you're trying to advertise a product. But once you go well beyond the realms of what that is, if you're saying that maybe you hint at maybe being able to jump higher because of a sort of sneaker, then maybe you can say that. But you can't say these sneakers are guaranteed to make you be able to dunk on someone, right? That's where you cross the line. To use a parallel, we want to be able to have artists express themselves freely. You don't want to stop creative expression. Art imitates life, life imitates art, and we don't know what that bright line is. But at the same time, as you mentioned, we don't want violence. We don't want people to point to specific activity and not be held accountable. But in this case, you're going to have to draw the line between what did they say in the lyrics that you can specifically point to that would indicate that criminal activity was afoot or would be continuing, or whatever definitions that they may be using in Georgia law. I'm not familiar with the specific terms of art in Georgia law, as it's a different jurisdiction than New York. But whatever they may be, you want to make sure that line is something that is reasonable, and it's something that you can understand. If you have other forms of evidence to prove that activities are taking place, you should introduce those pieces of evidence first before you're introducing lyrics, which may be at best circumstantial to sort of maybe tie in the connection to what Charles was saying earlier.
Charles Tucker Jr., in terms of the law moving forward, do you see any changes? I mean, part of this, we're talking about really the criminalization of rap in some ways, in terms of the way that it's being portrayed. What are your concerns about that in terms of your potential clients?
I'd like to see prosecutors have more of a lens, but there should be a line, because something has to be done, Lisa. The question is, to what benefit?
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers. You can share it and watch it again on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page. Remember, use your mind, it's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.